This is the story of a place where a young man with an angelic name would make football history with one throw. And a New Englander with the moniker of Fish would go on to become the greatest athlete his college had ever seen. While another, who could run as fast as the wind, would soar past the racial biases of his time, only to have his potential Olympic glory cut short by war. And where an elephant would be as famous in death as he had been in life. This is the story of a place on a hill called Tufts. 1852, a Somerville, Massachusetts businessman named Charles Tufts decides to donate 20 acres of land to the Universalist Church for the express purpose of building a college. The land is dominated by a rather bleak rise dubbed Walnut Hill. Nevertheless, it offers the best view of neighboring Boston. The church accepted his offer. Years later, the legend would grow that when Tufts was asked what he planned to do with the hill, he responded, "Put a light on it." The school opened with just 4 students and 7 professors. Tuition cost, $35. The number of students steadily grew, and with them came the playing of sports. Although the college did not officially support any athletic endeavors, the students took advantage of the fields around them and of the nearby Mystic River to hold impromptu running matches and boating excursions. Games were played between the freshmen and the sophomores and with local town teams. In 1861, war erupted between the North and the South. The Civil War, which would rage on for 4 years at the cost of 620,000 lives, would see the end of a way of life for one part of society and freedom for another. It would leave a scar on the national consciousness so deep that its impact is still felt today. Tufts was active in support of the Union cause. Horatio Bisbee was the first Tufts students to enlist in the Union Army. In total, 63 others would follow, many serving with distinction. It also saw the arrival of what only a few years before had been dubbed the national pastime, baseball. Baseball games were first played at Tufts in 1863. The following year, students organized into 2 rival teams, the All Nine of Tufts and the Ballou Club. A few years later, the gray-uniformed Tufts Baseball Club would be formed, with more officers than players. In 1869, the baseball club was the first Tufts team to play in an intercollegiate athletic contest. In 1864, football made an appearance on campus, although its rules resembled modern-day soccer more than the football we now know. It would be a while before the sport would become the mainstay of American colleges. In addition to baseball and football, informal track and fencing teams were formed, as well as a rifle club. Rowing, which would evolve in the next century as one of Tufts' strongest sports, was organized into a team, and a boat club was formed. But for the most part, intramural sports, classified as track and field sports, were the norm of the day. In 1874, the Tufts Athletic Association was formed to host these sports, and the events were compared by contemporaries to Sunday outings. An annual field day was organized by classes and consisted of running and walking races, high and broad jumping, hammer throwing, wheelbarrow, sack and potato races, and wrestling matches. They were held in the fall, and the class that won the most events received a barrel of cider. The activities took place on the grassy expanses surrounding the reservoir, where more than one unfortunate loser was often rewarded with a dunking. It was football that was to give Tufts one of its first real victories. On June 4, 1875, Tufts made history when they played Harvard in what many believe to be the first college football game played under American football rules. Coached by student captain Lyman Aldrich, the players included Austin Fletcher, for whom the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy would later be named. Eugene Bowen recorded the following. For the game at Harvard, the students borrowed horses in the hay wagon, the students climbing on the wagon, driving down North Massachusetts Avenue, with a growing number of urchins and others at leisure calling us farmers and hayseeds, jeering our progress towards Cambridge to play mighty Harvard. Tufts won the game 1-0, scoring the only touchdown and goal. It was the first time they would win against Harvard. In the later part of the 19th century, sports were not officially recognized by most college administrators. Many felt that the rigors of an academic life did not mesh well with that of an athletic one. During this time, students organized the athletics. They paid for their own uniforms, equipment, and transportation. There were no paid coaches, just student volunteers. At Tufts, students would have to wait until the 1890s for the college to build a gymnasium. By the 1870s, part of the faculty's cow pasture on the southern side of the campus had been taken over by students for various athletic pursuits. At first, the athletic field, such as it was enclosed by wooden stakes, which were often used for impromptu bonfires. Realizing that intercollegiate games could not take place at Tufts without a proper field, alumni were asked to raise $2,000 to pay for the laying out of a large oval with grounds for baseball, football, tennis courts, and general athletics. The oval, as it became known, was completed in time for the fall term of 1894. One of its idiosyncrasies was an active spring located in the baseball team's outfield. Many a fielder returned drenched going after a fly ball. But by the end of the 19th century, baseball and football seemed to lose their appeal at Tufts, replaced by the suddenly popular track sports. At the same time, the administration finally decided to pay attention to sports. In 1899, they ruled that athletic participation would be a privilege, bestowed only on those students with good academic standing, and that athletes would not be given special treatment. These ideas became the foundation of Tufts' athletic philosophy, which still applies today. In 1889, the college received a donation that was to change the face of Tufts athletics forever. But at the time, no one knew it. P.T. Barnum, circus master and marketing genius, saw one of his biggest attractions, a large African elephant called Jumbo, killed while crossing train tracks in Canada. Ever to see $2 when most saw $1, Barnum had the elephant's hide stuffed and the skeleton reassembled so that they could tour separately at the same time. Barnum, who was on the first board of trustees at Tufts, donated the hide to the college along with $50,000 to erect a museum of natural history in which to display it. Jumbo the elephant would become the beloved mascot for generations of Tufts students and provide a name for all Tufts athletic teams. 1900, a new century and an interest in sports sweeps across America. Tufts was no exception. That year, tennis became an intercollegiate sport at Tufts. A boxing class was formed, and the new sport of basketball was played for the first time. The administration took notice. After previous failed attempts, the college formed an advisory committee on athletics. Now all team sports were placed under the supervision of the instructor of physical education in order to secure the better discipline and higher efficiency of the teams. At the same time, a constitution was drafted by an athletic association made up of faculty and students to develop guidelines for participation and administration of the burgeoning program. Yet many newer sports had trouble getting a start at Tufts. In 1907, an attempt to organize a hockey team turned into a 7-year struggle to get one formed. One sport that saw a resurgence in interest was football, and it was to bring Tufts some of its greatest sports moments. The first Tufts athlete to earn recognition away from the university was T.S. Knight, a member of the class of 1903. He became the first Tufts football player to be named to Walter Camp's All-America team. This son of a Tufts theology professor would go on to become a trustee of the college in 1927. But even greater fame was garnered by the 1913 football team. They earned a reputation for passing, not a common feature of the game at the time. Team member George Angel, a member of the class of 1915, is reputed to have thrown the first forward pass in football history. Led by Clarence "Pop" Houston, who would later become the first athletic director at Tufts, the team dominated in the East that year, posting a 7-1 record and outscoring its opponents 174-22 along the way. The team's only loss came to Army by a score of 2-0 when the cadets scored on a safety. During the game, a young Army sophomore halfback suffered a broken leg. His name? Dwight D. Eisenhower. In a letter he later wrote in 1955, declining an honorary degree from Tufts due to a busy schedule, he confirmed his injury, noting, "No wonder that my knee has never quite recovered from that tackle. At the very least, I find some consolation in blaming all my poor golf shots on my bad knee." 1914, World War I, the Great War, which began with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo and would end 4 years later in the trenches of France at the cost of more than 10 million lives. Although America did not enter the war until 1917, the Tufts community was active in helping the war effort, and men trained on campus under the Student Army Training Corps. More than 1,000 of them would serve. 22 would lose their lives. The Roaring Twenties, the decade that followed the war, witnessed one of the greatest moments of prosperity in American history. At Tufts, it was the decade that saw the emergence of arguably the greatest athlete to have ever graced the Tufts field. His name was Frederick Ellis, but everyone called him Fish, a nickname he earned because he hailed from the fishing town of Gloucester. A shy boy, Ellis soon showed his skill at sports, any sports. A quarterback on the undefeated 1927 football team, he would score 81 points that year and go on to captain the team the next. He also ran track and played basketball and baseball, learning to hit as a lefty in order to take advantage of his speed. Ellis went on to earn all New England honors in football, basketball, baseball, and track, the first Tufts student to do so.